Welcome. Hello. It's time for Blocktalk. Yeah, we are on Bitcoin block 420,489. It means we're only, 209,511 blocks until the next halving. So, mark that calendar and maybe load up the bitcoinclock.com and watch it. Get so close every day. Yeah, so this show, we don't really have any sponsors. I kind of dropped the ball on emailing a couple guys to see if they wanted to sponsor, but let's just thank Steemit because they definitely, picked the ball up. So thanks to everyone who, uploaded the post. Bernie Sanders, Ned, Chloe, Jen, you guys, the president. Yeah, you guys are the greatest. So yeah, I really liked Steemit. It was an awesome interview with Ned and Dan, and yeah, I'm just gonna, say that Steve is probably the best, and I really don't like crypto Reddit. But let's see here. I'm gonna make a post here quickly. Yeah, I don't like crypto Reddit. It sucks, except for our Dogecoin. You guys are cool. Right. So yeah, share that link everywhere. Transactions. Oh, okay, whatever. on with the show. Technical difficulties just happen all the time, but I'm really glad to actually be talking with probably the first developer I interviewed on Blocktalk today. So it was May 8th, 2015. We had Douglas Pike on. Hey, Doug.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, fantastic. How are you doing, man?
Good, good.
Got to say congratulations on the new family member. And
thanks.
Among other things in the crypto space, it sounds like you guys are generating quite a buzz. And yeah, I was really happy to get your email about doing a show because yeah, I was actually looking forward to talking to you earlier in the year, but family comes first.
Yeah, I had a crying baby that I had to deal with a couple months back. Now she's a happy baby, so
That's
we're good.
Oh, fantastic! Again, congratulations. So I guess we got to get down to the nitty gritty here. Well, maybe not everyone's familiar with Vericoin. Do you think you can give us the history or how Vericoin launched and how the coins were distributed to begin with?
Sure. So we started in May of 2014, and we had about 1 week of proof of work to distribute the initial supply, and it was generic script. At the time, there wasn't tons of script ASICs. They were just starting to come onto the market, so it was a reasonable time to use script for distribution, like just generic script. And then after a week, it switched to proof of stake, and our launch innovative feature was the variable interest model, which was dependent on the network staking level. So basically, the more people that staked, the higher the network interest rate was to incentivize staking. And we also released an auto conversion to Bitcoin service in the wallet called Veribit, and this makes it basically so that you can just pay for stuff at any merchant that accepts Bitcoin right from the Vericoin wallet, which basically now is essentially Shapeshift. Actually, it's funny because shortly after we launched Veribit, I had private messaged. Is it Eric Voorhees? Is he?
Yeah, Voorhees. Yeah.
Yeah, I had private messaged him, and I was because he was just one of the Bitcoin space people, and I was like, you should really check out Vericoin because we're doing some innovative stuff. And he was like, what makes your coin innovative and interesting? And I explained everything, and Veribit was the final thing that I mentioned. I never heard back from him, but then a few months later, no, it was more like a year later, they launched Shapeshift. I'm sure many people thought of the idea, but we put it in the wallet, made it very easy to use. And then we also put it in the wallet a mixing service so that you can basically privately send Vericoin through a mixing service, and protect inefficiently, as the mixing services are, protect the privacy of your transaction. The other thing that we did was we also set up an SMS coin service. So we did all that. We started to moon, and we had 30% of our supply and 80% of our volume on MintPal, and it got hacked. 8 million Vericoin was stolen in the hack, which is about 30% of our supply. And we decided very quickly that we would do a rollback. And we made the decision because with 30% of the supply, you could have easily, actually, at that time, 51% attacked the coin and double spent. So not only would basically we have the potential of a 51% attack, but once a successful double spent is executed, I mean, game over, basically. Your coins
you'd be crashing markets galore. Like, yeah. I love that you were kind of mentioning the feature so nonchalantly, like, oh yeah, this was pretty, we have mixing and all this stuff. We're in the climate of 2014 when that kind of launched, or no, yeah, it was 2014. In that area, like that was all really innovative stuff. Like people were going crazy over that, and then now it's just like stuff that's on a Litecoin roadmap. Like no one gives a shit.
No, I know. things change pretty quickly with the 24/7 market. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, no, and these are just like standard features because I'm sure everyone's just taking out your GitHub and pump it into a coin right at the beginning. So,
sure, yeah.
But yeah, no, the MintPal hack was really interesting, and we'll definitely talk more about that, I think, later in the show, because I want to hear your thoughts on the whole Ethereum thing.
Yeah.
But the DAO is a topic for later on. We can kill the last hour of the show with that. But we should probably hear about this new thing you guys are doing. That's the buzz on the street, is you guys are doing an ICO, and it's not for Vericoin. It's for something new. You guys, you want to tell me about it?
Yeah. So we originally weren't. We hadn't actually, and this is the truth, I'm not making this up. We had no plans to do an ICO, actually. And then the community was like, you should just turn this into an ICO. And we were like, that makes sense. But we did it, we're doing it a little bit differently. So we are creating a separation between the commodity and the currency. So basically, in the gold standard days prior to the Nixon shock, the dollar, and this is, not news to people, was standardized to gold. And Nixon said, screw that, because we're running out of gold and other countries have a lot of gold. We're going to just float the currency on nothing, basically. Just the value is going to be solely based on its value as a usable currency. And that's the standard fiat approach today. And Bitcoin changed that equation by combining the currency and the commodity together. And that's why, when you first get introduced to Bitcoin, you're like, this doesn't make sense. It's a coin, but you mine it. Like, nobody mines coins. They mine gold, and then they have dollars. So Bitcoin basically took the two separate things, currency and commodity, and made them one. And that's actually the way that currency was in like hunter-gatherer days, when like shells and beads and necklaces were valuable, but they were basically just things you could just find in the environment. And
they're just like placeholders, I guess.
Yeah, essentially.
They're just placeholders.
Yeah, and easy to quantify and break up into pieces, or they're already in pieces, etc. And so Bitcoin, so you enter Bitcoin and you're like, how is the currency and the commodity one and the same? It doesn't make sense. And then you go through this process of understanding the origins of money, if you're really into it. And then through this process, we came to the conclusion that actually it's much better now that it's been proven that both a currency and a commodity can be digital. Miners build an ecosystem, and Bitcoin is a successful currency. Now that that's been proven, it's actually better to separate them. And there's a lot of important protocol reasons for this. For instance, some simple ones that like make a significant difference. Bitcoin now, because of the block size problem, controversial debate, is basically driving itself into a fee market, and that's fine because it's a free market, and there can be a fee market. But the problem is people don't give a crap. Oh, this is the internet, so people don't give a shit about decentralization, mainstream audience. They just care how much it costs to send their money around.
Yeah, well, it seems to be a little bit of a pie in the sky philosophy of the Bitcoin space that, oh, everything's better with a blockchain. Well, some things don't, it doesn't make any difference. The user doesn't realize if it's decentralized or not.
Yeah, and I think the vast majority of users are not going to understand, they're just not going to be interested enough to go deeper into it. There will be a large fraction that do understand and see the importance, and the current crypto community is the start of that. But at the end of the day, businesses, everyone, mainstream adoption is going to be solely dependent on how cheap it is to send money around the world. And if Bitcoin or any other currency is cheaper than all the competitive transaction systems, and the speed and the efficiency of the transaction processing is equivalent, they'll choose the cheaper option. So an example of separating the currency and the commodity that's beneficial is this. Higher fees is better for miners. It's worse for the currency. Slower block time is better for the mining consensus, but worse for the currency. And more confirmations is better, obviously, for brute force consensus hashing, but worse for the currency. So what we're doing is we're leveraging the security, the strengths of a conservative proof of work, and setting it aside as solely intended to be a commodity. It's basically, it's not as good of a currency. Varium, which is what we're creating, is going to be proof of work. It's not going to be as good of a currency as Vericoin, and that's part of the design. But the fees are going to be higher for the miners. The rewards are going to be more profitable, and the block time is going to be slower, and overall than Vericoin, and the confirmations are going to be longer. Most of the time you're like, oh, this is a shit currency. This is like the worst digital currency ever. But what we can do is we can take the security that you gain from computational brute force, and we can submit it onto the Vericoin blockchain as well. So essentially what's going to happen is two blockchains. One is a mining blockchain, one is a staking blockchain. The mining blockchain is a commodity, it's intended to be, and the staking blockchain, as it has always been, is a currency. The key innovation of Varium is this. We're going to have a variable block time. So as the computational power grows, the block time gets faster and faster. So we're going to start at about 5 minutes. It's going to start at about 5 minutes. And it's going to go, in our tests, we're definitely taking it, up to 30 seconds, but we're probably going to go faster than that. As the computational power grows, we're going to allow it basically to go faster than that. So the awesome thing about this is, as there's more miners coming online, the performance gets better and better. And those blocks, the Varium miners, are going to also be passing Vericoin blocks via auxiliary mining, which we know about from like Dogcoin on Litecoin and Namecoin on Bitcoin. And what's going to happen is the Vericoin blockchain is going to be accepting these blocks from the Varium miners. And these blocks are going to occur between the 1 minute block time of Vericoin. So essentially, as Varium goes from 5 minutes with an increase in computational power down to, say, 30 seconds, Vericoin's block time is going to go from 1 minute to, at 30 seconds, it would be 20 seconds on average. So basically what we're going to do is have a speed, the transaction processing speed of Vericoin is going to get faster and faster and faster. The consensus is more decentralized because you have miners on a separate blockchain and stakers on the currency blockchain. So the consensus is even more decentralized than it currently is. And the miners are going to get good fees and good rewards, and the stakers are going to get their current low inflation but decent interest on the staking. And the other problem that this variable block time solves is the scaling problem that's discussed in the Bitcoin space often. So by having this, as the computational power increases and the block time gets faster, the scaling problem is automatically scaled because a shorter block time includes fewer transactions per unit time. So you can have, we're going to have Varium start off at a 2-minute block time, or a 5-minute block time, but a 2 megabyte block size. So,
let me stop you there just for a sec, because so you're going to have more blocks because you're doing them faster. So, but you're going to probably have the same amount of transactions, right? So wouldn't it actually be more data because now you just have block headers randomly skewed in there? If you have the same amount of transactions.
So yeah, so net it'll be more data, but per block it'll be less. Because so say you have, or it'll be, so essentially if it grows proportional to computational power, and say transactions also grow proportional to computational power, which is reasonable, basically the number of people using it, then what it'll do is the amount of transactions that can be processed per unit time will change proportionally with the usage. So essentially, you can do two things. You can change the block time or you can change the block size.
Well, okay, so you've solved the network scaling problem, it sounds like, but you haven't solved the storage problem yet, like the amount of space you're taking up, which like network latency and the amount of the size of packets going through the network, that's a serious issue, and I think you guys have definitely solved that problem, but at what cost? I don't know. Like, can you kind of give us how much bigger is your chain going to get? And the fact that now you have 2 chains that half of, I guess, all your users will have, or like I was reading like the miners are also going to be running full nodes of Vericoin, so you're going to have more nodes, I guess, net. There's more incentive to, I guess, run hardware for your networks, but yeah, like I think you're solving part of the scaling problem.
So regarding the total, that's a really good question actually. Regarding the total net data usage, we're basically partitioning it. So essentially, the miners will need definitely to run the Varium blockchain, and if they're submitting blocks to the Vericoin blockchain, they need that as well. But the Vericoin users don't need the Varium blockchain. So so basically, we have a partitioned network. So for instance, if we were to have everybody on one chain, it would be more transactions for everyone and more data for everyone. And basically, we're taking the opposite approach to Ethereum, actually, in this regard. Rather than having everything on one chain, we're having multiple chains. And the reason really is primarily network latency. In addition to the fact that one chain, everything on one chain is more of a centralized scenario, like we see with the DAO, and we can get into that later. But the DAO goes down, and this general purpose blockchain is now potentially changed, where one application goes down.
Well, and I think you guys have done something really interesting, which is you've sacrificed maybe some efficiency, but for more decentralization. So that's a really interesting concept you guys are kind of going with here.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way to put it.
Well, and that's the idea. Decentralization is not supposed to be efficient. It's supposed to be decentralized.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm trying to, I guess, wrap my head around how the chains work together. Is it kind of like they're both merge mining each other? Is that how they're kind of like you're putting a little bit of TX in one in the other block and a little bit of their TX in this block, or
It's going to be one way. So only, and that what I mean by that is Vericoin is going to accept Varium blocks, but it's going to accept blocks from Varium miners, I should say. But Varium is not going to accept proof of stake blocks. So basically, what we're doing is by setting up a separate proof of work network, we're essentially making the commodity Varium, the proof of work network, act as a engine for transaction processing, and it's like a separate engine that speeds up Vericoin transactions and scales the transactions in smaller time units according to the block time. So basically, it's adding speed to the transactions, and it's freeing up the amount of space per unit time in the transactions, and it's doing it with brute force power like normal POW is, and it's two different modes of consensus occurring on the transaction blockchain. But the key difference is the protocol differences. Like I was saying, Varium is always going to have 10 times more costly in Satoshi fees than Vericoin, and that's good for the miners, but it makes it a worse currency. But we don't want it to be a currency because we already have a good currency. What we want is costs, ironically. So when we first got into Vericoin, we knew that less costs means a cheaper, more efficient system. And if it doesn't cost a lot to run the system, then there doesn't need to be a fee market. And if there doesn't need to be a fee market, then it can be very cheap to send money around. If it's very cheap to send money around, it's competitive with Visa. It's competitive with transaction systems, because the general population will be like, well, I can send my money almost for free.
Yeah. Well, the proof of work is interesting because what you guys sound like you're kind of doing is the Vericoin network is hiring contractors, which are the miners, independent people who might not have any interest in Vericoin or Varium. They just have some hash to throw around, and they're burning their electricity, which turns it into a commodity. Like, that's kind of the conversation I've had with numerous people. It's proof of work. It's burnt electricity. That's what these tokens represent. Proof of work, proof of burnt electricity.
Right.
So
that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So the higher the difficulty gets, the more it's worth, because you also factor in time there too. But so
yeah, the miners have to sell for above their electric costs.
Yeah, exactly. So it kind of creates, a base fee, rate of, or price of production.
Yeah, so we're basically adding in this cost factor, which sets a value, and we're having that value be added to the Vericoin blockchain, but it doesn't need to result in a fee market race because they're separate blockchains. So basically, in a way, we're getting our cake and we're eating it too, because we're getting the costs of burning electricity, setting a value in an ecosystem that improves the performance of the currency, which in the Varium wallet, you can automatically swap your Varium for Vericoin. It's going to be based on the market value. We're not going to control the prices, or we couldn't.
Yeah. Looking at the pricing that you have for the ICO, though, it sounds like you're trying to achieve 10 to 1 roughly. So maybe one pulls the other out, the other pulls the other down.
Yeah. And one thing that, if you watch CoinMarketCap, the one thing that seems to hold is the supply to to value ratios. Like, you know, has a billion coins or something. I can't, you know, a lot of coins. I think it's like a billion or something. And each coin is worth like next to nothing. But there's a lot of coins out there, so the market cap is good. That holds. And we think that Varium could easily have a market cap equal to Vericoin, and it's ultimately going to have 10 times lower total supply. So just solely on that supply ratio, we estimate that the value will hold that ratio as well. If it does, just solely based on supply and, you know, the host, you know, us being the hosts of Varium and Vericoin, then it could also be an interesting marketplace where there's actually predictability and a price ratio between the commodity and the currency.
Okay. So I got two more kind of technical questions about the actual proof of work. What algorithm are you guys using for your proof of work chain?
So what we're doing is we're actually making a new implementation of script. We're calling it script hard. And we're calling it that because...
Sorry, I find that just a little funny. Is hard an acronym, or is it just you guys go hard, or you should call it script ham?
Well, the reason we're calling it that is because it's very hard memory. Okay, so basically, the exact memory requirements we're still testing for, but it's going to be a minimum of 2 megabytes per thread, essentially. So basically what that does is it makes it, for all the GPUs we've tested so far, you just get 100% hardware errors because the GPUs cannot hold capacity for the memory required to use all the threads. And in the case of CPUs, there's not that many threads, like there's maybe max 12. So it doesn't add up to much RAM usage. So essentially it's a CPU efficient coin due to the memory requirements. And as far as ASICs are concerned, in the long run, RAM is the most expensive thing. So it makes it much more costly to produce an ASIC.
Well, if it becomes, you know, super profitable to mine Varium, don't you think that someone might bite the bullet and actually make an ASIC for it?
Yeah, we can't stop that. All we can do is so if Varium were to, if its value were to moon, you know, just crazy moon, then it could be profitable to create an ASIC and sell an ASIC for it. But I don't think that's going to happen in the short run, not because of the price, but because of the price of the memory that it would require. So basically, you'd have to have this massive initial investment in an ASIC, which you know, it would be a much more costly ASIC than the top of the line Bitcoin ASICs right now. So I don't see that happening. Even if Varium were to like go crazy, I don't see that happening, mostly just because of memory costs right now. Over time, that could change. But one of the things that we may employ at a later time, which requires more research and testing, is to have the memory, as the difficulty reaches certain thresholds, have the memory continue to increase. If we feel like we need to implement a variable hard memory aspect to Varium, we can. It's set up to be able to do that, but we need to do more testing to make sure that that's a strategy we want to employ. All that we really want to do is just keep the consensus decentralized as much as possible. There's no way to stop pools. I mean, that is not really, there's no way to stop them. But we can make it so that there's more individual miners, and we can do that by preventing GPU and ASIC mining for the most part.
Well, I've seen kind of two approaches recently about ASICs that I find very interesting. Okay, so you have Ethereum, which for the longest time, even now, it was the most profitable coin to mine with graphics cards. Like you pay a graphics card off in a month mining it.
Right.
And that is pretty close to actually, you know, people wanting to develop ASICs for. But the only reason why no one's fighting that bullet, and maybe even guys are kind of reconsidering, you know, ordering more graphics cards right now, is because they know Ethereum is going proof of stake. So that plan for the chain is kind of what's preventing it. Who knows? Maybe though, you know, all these miners, when they fork for proof of stake, that all the miners are like, no, we're going to keep the proof of work chain going.
Oh, God.
So,
Disaster for them.
I don't know, with all the forking that's going on with Ethereum, anything could happen, really. Yeah, who knows? The other example that I've seen was kind of Decred, which is a hybrid proof of stake, proof of work. I'm not sure if it's familiar with Decred currency.
I've seen it, but I'm not familiar.
But yeah, they're kind of doing kind of the same with what you guys are. You know, they're combining the security of both chains and, you know, the value and the voting. I think they're a little more, what's the word, hybridized, or but they're using a different Blake 256 algo, which is kind of efficient, I guess. But it's definitely not ASIC resistance. Like, I think there's already FPGAs, like those programmable chips that are kind of like ASICs. So they're kind of like, you know what, bring on the ASIC, because that just adds more security to the network. So they're actually looking forward to it, I guess, let's put it that way. So,
I would say I'm not opposed to ASICs either. The only problem is you ultimately are reducing the number of miners, because there's only a certain fraction of miners that are going to be willing to invest a significant amount of money in an ASIC, even a GPU. Whereas if it's an actual executed CPU coin like what we're doing, then anyone can run a full mining node on their decent computer, and basically you just increase the number of miners that way.
Yeah, again, I think it's an increasing cost, but it helps with decentralization. So you guys are actually, well, and not just that, with distribution as well. You know, like, you're not going to get some guy with a supercomputer and, you know, 500 graphics cards, you know, mining Varium. Well, you might, but
right. Yeah,
but
no, exactly. I mean, distribution is definitely a major factor in that as well. Yeah.
So it sounds like you guys are kind of considering it, but you're not like. I know I saw ASIC resistance on the AND, but talking to you now, it seems like you're not completely ruling that out. Like that's what like Litecoin's initial marketing gimmick was. Oh, you know, ASIC resistance. You know, you can mine with your graphics card, and then bam, we got script ASICs, and now we're shitting out altcoins like crazy. So.
Well, I mean, there's a clear solution to the ASIC problem, and it's the cost of memory. It's the most expensive component per amount, you know, that you need for a computer. So the solution to the problem is memory requirements, and it's pretty easy to have a hashing algorithm that has a significant memory requirement. We're for decentralization of the consensus. We're not explicitly opposed to ASICs, but it tends to centralize the consensus. So we're erring on the side of decentralization, basically.
That's good. I like it. So we got some questions rolling in on the chat, and I think that kind of covers the tech specs kind of portion of the show. There are a lot more about the ICO. So we got one here from Yoni Berger. Why do ICO with Vericoin and not convert currency VRC 1-to-1 or separate ICO with Bitcoin? Because right now you guys, I guess, are affecting the entire price of Vericoin. Like, if I look at the chart now, I'd say this announcement in the last 4 months has definitely affected the price of Vericoin.
Right. Yeah, I mean, basically, there's a number of reasons. One is because we're pairing them together. They're a paired protocol system. So it would be actually undercutting our entire strategy to use a currency we didn't create to accept payment for Varium. We created a currency. We're willing to accept it, use it, and the Varium and Vericoin are going to be paired. So this is part of the pairing process. This is like the initiation of the pairing. And that's why we didn't have like just a proportional ICO. We're trying to set, at least initially, the market will decide after the fact, but we're trying to encourage the market to a 10-to-1 ratio, because we think that's ultimately what it should be on average based on supply, and we think it would be a great additional bonus if there was a somewhat reliable ratio between the two. So the pairing is why we're accepting only Vericoin. The ratio is why we're accepting only Vericoin. In addition to the fact that it does help Vericoin, so we're basically we're accepting Vericoin in only as payment, and then the community voted to take half of the funds that come in from the ICO and never move them and only stake the funds. And what this results in is a in perpetuity faucet, essentially, for Vericoin development, marketing, infrastructure costs. Primarily, it's going to be used for basic infrastructure costs, but we're probably going to we might even have extra for other things, just on the interest earned from half of the ICO take-in. So it's like, and the other thing that's beneficial about it is, this large supply becomes now a reinforcement for the security of the network, and it funds us in perpetuity for a bunch of stuff.
So how is that being staked? Like, how are you guys securing these 50% of these coins? And like, where is the staker being run? Give me the address.
I don't have that, and I wouldn't give it. But no, I mean, so that's another thing we're going to vote on, is how those funds are going to be handled. It's more difficult. We would just do a multi-sig, but it's as far as I know, it's impossible practically to do a multi-sig on a staking address, because you'd have to have all the multi-parties sign every time you stake. We could do that, but it would be inefficient, just for people's time and how much we would be able to stake, etc. So the community is going to vote on how the funds are controlled. It is not going to be just the coins come in and then there's no transparent accounting for what happens to those coins or how they're handled. The community is going to vote how that's going to be handled, and it could be handled by multiple members of the communities as key holders for the coins, multiple members of the community and potentially the developers, or however the community wants to do it, so that there's not one again centralized point of failure. But the coins will never move, and that's the goal, and we're going to do it in as decentralized a way as possible. Honestly, we don't want all the coins to be in one place anyway. But the benefit of it is going to be, it's actually going to significantly secure the Vericoin network, and balance it against some of the other larger addresses that exist, which is nice.
As long as we don't have to fork for a hack, I'm going to be fine with it.
Well, actually, we did make a commitment to the community back after the rollback that we would never fork again, no matter what. We would let the coin die if that's what it came to. And the reason is basically because we look at our rollback as a protection of the consensus, a prevent of a double spend. That's the only reason we rolled back. And you only get one shot to fix the consensus, essentially. I mean, that's what we did with proof of stake time. In the early stage of a coin, in our view.
So how are these votes being done? Like, are you guys kind of using, the wallet to do voting?
No, we're using our official forum, and basically anyone who's a member of the forum that has a minimum of 5 posts can vote. And everyone in the forum can easily tell, whether someone has got 5 posts because of spam or not. And there's members of the community that can administer. Like occasionally we get people sign up and then boom, 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 there's like these random spam, posts. So basically, it's a community-run forum. It's our official forum, but it's community-run. It was set up by the community members, and the voting takes place there. And if you are a new Vericoin user, you can go on vericoinforums.com, set up an account. Once you make 5 posts, you can start voting.
I don't know. This server might not be very decentralized, though.
That's true. Yeah, this is a like all the forums. It's a centralized forum.
You know what you guys should do is you should make a Vericoin DAO. I think that's the way you should do it. And then that way, when someone figures out how to steal these 50% of these coins, the voting, you guys will be in the exact same scenario. But you've already kind of stated, I guess, your plans for if that happens. This is just me making a joke, but
no, these are real considerations. Yeah, I mean, we definitely the 50% of coins have to be secure, and definitely we won't do any rollback ever again.
So my suggestion to be for you guys, and I don't know a lot of Vericoin, but I just hearing what you guys are saying now, maybe you guys should vote on, instead of having this be staking and an integral part of security, just burn it. Burn half of these coins, because you're never gonna have these coins ever coming back on the market. You're never gonna have that interest rate from them. So overall, I feel like it would help you guys a lot more, and you never deal with this risk of having a Vericoin DAO.
Yeah, I mean, well, we can avert the Vericoin DAO risk by just distributing the coins up across trusted members of the community, and people whose names are actually known, for instance, and if their share of the coins was to suddenly go missing, their reputation would be on the line. But the community voted to do this stake endowment for 2 reasons. One is it's an in perpetuity funding mechanism without us taking a share of the rewards. Like the other method is basically the wallet sends us coins, and we don't feel right about that. At that point, it's Visa essentially. And this is basically a decentralized way to do it, where people voted to distribute the coins to trusted, transparent community members, and they are held responsible for their share. And we can split it up so that it's not each person doesn't hold too much. But burning is also kind of weird, because we were thinking about burning. Burning is weird because it's throwing away good currency, like we can have the same market effect of burning, but also get funding.
Well, that scene in like the Dark Knight or whatever Batman movie where the Joker just burns all those all that money.
Yeah.
Like you can make a thing out of it, and then you're throwing away good currency, but you're increasing the value of all other currency. It's the same as I shoot a rock of gold into space, all other gold becomes slightly more valuable.
Right.
Just my opinion. You guys should maybe vote on it. Just my opinion, I guess. After it's been a long 14 months, Doug, I've learned a little bit about other currencies, so that's just my opinion for you.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've already voted on the stake endowment fund, but votes need to be taken on how the funds are handled. And if for some reason we come to the conclusion that there can't be a secure way to handle the funds, then we could easily vote to burn them. And that'll be a task for the community to figure it out.
Now for the other 50%, you guys have like was it development, marketing, and design, third-party partnerships. So are you guys going to be voting on like where those are being spent, or are you guys be public about when they need to be sold? Like you're creating a bit of a market machine here if you guys are making this all public.
Yeah. So yeah, the usage of the funds will be voted on by the community. So for instance, like third-party partnerships, we don't have a third party currently. So there'll be a vote on what third party or what third parties we should work with. Marketing and design will definitely be, I mean, there's a lot of decisions to be made on how exactly that should be implemented. And development too, there's a lot of projects that we could or could not do. And that'll need to be determined as well. So there's going to be community members that are some sort of that are basically hosting actually, I think someone's going to make for each part of the funds a page that describes transparently on the blockchain what the funding is, what it's for, what it's sent. As far as the actual, I mean, here's basically how it's going to break down. The vast majority of that ICO is not going to be spent in anywhere near the short term because we don't have a third party. We don't know exactly what marketing we want to do. And we don't have any major development projects besides what we're already doing without any funding. So essentially, the vast majority of those funds and all the usage is to be determined and voted on is going to just be held until full plans are figured out and implemented. And then the 50% is never going to be moved.
Okay. Well, you know what? You should put like 10% of that, or half of that 20% of marketing towards Blocktalk. You know what? I promise it won't sell. I'll just stake, and I'll maybe give away the whatever I stake. So that'll be a faucet for the show.
Well, maybe we could that could be third-party partnerships or marketing design.
Oh, perfect. I got more of a percentage then. I could be both.
It would just be one. I don't know.
Well, and I know a guy, a former NSA dude who knows how to run a bitchin' firewall. If you guys really need help with security for your staking fund, I can definitely get you in touch with them. If somebody gives me, if you guys vote to give me some marketing funds, that's probably where I'll be staking them. If it's depending on how much you guys raise, really.
Well, we do actually have on board Dave Bohm, who in addition to his educational background, he works for Microsoft, and he's in charge of major aspects of their cloud drive system. Like I forget what it's called because I don't use Windows, but Dave does because he works for Microsoft. Anyway, Dave no, I'm just messing around. But Dave does know. I mean, he has to for his job, and he works for one of the best technology companies in the history of mankind. He has to know the best security practices. So in addition to what me, Pat, and Steve know, Dave is definitely a security expert. He even worked for the government at one point as in some sort of security auditing position, if I remember correctly. So, and we also have people in the community who are actually pen testers and security experts as well. So I don't think we're going to have a problem securing the funds, but we do need to decide exactly how they're going to be secured.
Well, that's good. You got a lot of white hats on your team. So, and to speak to the quality of people that work for Microsoft, both Bill and I think Richie of Bittrex work at Microsoft or worked at Microsoft or contracted them. There's some affiliation with Microsoft, and yeah, they've never been hacked. So I would say the quality of talent that Microsoft is hiring is it's above par, better than MidPal.
You could say that. Yeah, like MinPal had nothing to do with us in effect. The only thing that had to do with us was the amount of coins MinPal ended up having.
Bill actually just pinged me. He said, "Can you tell Doug to reach out to us since we actually secure all wallets all the time on Azure?" So,
Okay,
so yeah, there you go. You guys got your secure staking wallet right there.
cool.
Let's see here. The ICO. What was the other question I had? Let me go to my little list. Oh yeah, what's the escrow? I guess you guys have on the ICO funds.
The escrow.
Yeah, I saw something here about it on the but because these funds are being sent to a Vericoin address, like is it a multi-sig? Who's all in control of the multi-sig? Like, how do we know you guys are going to get hacked before the community,
Yeah,
get the vote on?
Yeah, so when the funds are received, it's going to be a multi-sig address that's held by certainly multiple developers, and we might include trusted community members as well. We're going to be making that decision in the next few days or so, exactly who holds the keys to the multi-sig. And the keys will be encrypted and secured. And Dave, the guy who works for Microsoft I was talking about, is handling it. So he's going to be receiving the funds and handling the system that receives the funds and sends the Varium funds out.
Okay. And one other question on where are we here? Share my screen. It's on the deflationary curve, or as you guys seem to be calling it, disinflation, or like.
Yeah, it's actually disinflation is also the correct term for Bitcoin. Deflation, well, officially according to the protocol, the Bitcoin Vericoin model is disinflation. If you include the fact that coins are lost, it could be deflation, but that's not necessarily known. So according to the protocol, it's actually the proper descriptor is disinflation, and what that means is basically a shrinking inflation rate. In the case of Bitcoin, once the inflation rate goes to zero, then it is going to be deflationary because there's no new coins coming onto the market, and certainly some of them are going to be lost or whatever, burned or something. So Bitcoin is actually disinflationary until it hits zero inflation, and then it would be deflationary. And Vericoin and Varium is the same.
Okay, yeah, because I did an explanation video on interest rates, and yeah, I got a lot of feedback on, oh, it's technically inflation. I'm like, I think you can kind of use them interchangeably, but yeah, what you're saying.
It depends on how you, like, what you include in what's happening.
Yeah.
But according to basically a shrinking inflation rate is disinflation. So if you exclude coins being burned and stuff like that, it's disinflation. But basically what Vericoin does is its inflation rate is calculated based on the initial proof of work supply, and that's a constant number. And as more coins come onto the market, then a percentage of that constant is smaller than the new total. So basically, very slowly, the inflation rate is dropping. In the case of Varium, it's going to be exceedingly disinflationary because assuming that the computational power increases, as the computational power increases and the block time decreases, the reward is going to have roughly per minute decrease in the block time. So basically, say at 5-minute block time for Varium, there is, and this is approximately what it's going to be, there is
you maybe need to draw on that fancy chalkboard behind there. You might have some important formulas, but yeah, visuals always help.
Well, it's actually, there's a simple way to describe it, and that is if you have a 5 Varium reward per minute mining, at a 5-minute block time, you have 5 minutes times 5 Varium, and that's 25 Varium. If you go down to 4 minutes, now the paid reward is going to be cut in half. So now it's 2.5 Varium for every 4 minutes, which is 10. So basically, we would go from a 25 Varium reward per block to a 10 Varium reward per block. But it's paid in minutes mining between blocks. And that is a novel implementation, because if you skip through blocks very quickly because you have a significant hash rate, you're actually going to make less coins than if you hit the target block time right on. And that ultimately, it's still a horse race for computational power. So that all is going to float. But your best move is to mine at the secured target for the secured amount, for the proper amount of hash power. So the whole system is going to have an additional feedback loop for efficiency, essentially, based on this reward structure and the variable block time.
Okay. No, that's really interesting, and definitely, I don't know, innovative, and never seen it before in the space. So you guys don't have a fixed supply of Varium, and it's kind of it's going to be kind of a floating interest rate. So this isn't quite like Bitcoin's supply. This is probably more like Doge, where like Doge is producing 10,000 every block now. Now that it's at its lowest point of production.
So what we are going to have is, once Varium hits parity with Vericoin's supply, the 10 times parity, then Varium is going to move into the equivalent inflation of Vericoin, which is a shrinking approximately 2%. So once we hit 10 times parity in supply with Vericoin, it's going to switch into basically Vericoin's inflation, disinflation model of around 2%. But when that happens, depends on how much mining occurs. That could happen anywhere between 5 and like 60 some years, depending on how much power there is mining Varium.
Okay.
So it's never gonna be more than 10 times lower supply of Vericoin.
All right. I think I got it. Maybe you guys can do up an infographic for me, and time and supply.
Yeah, we're going to need to describe a lot of these things with infographics.
I just remembered something else. I was going to ask Ethan of Tendermint to join us, but he's extremely busy with testnet and everything. But he's doing kind of this next gen proof of stake stuff, and this is the same protocol that I guess Ethereum's doing with Vlad's Casper. So I'm sure you've read maybe some of his work, and it's the proof of stake with something at stake. So essentially what this means is, like, I guess with most pure coin-esque proof of stake coins, if the chains split, you could be staking the same coins in both chains. You could have multiple chains. So was this solved with proof of stake time, or are you guys kind of solving it now, or is it still possible?
No, this was solved actually with proof of stake time, but it was part of our design, but we wanted to actually do statistics of how this actually works on the main net, because it's hard to simulate a natural network on the test net, and this is an important thing that requires like real world conditions. So actually, we've been calculating its efficacy on the main net since we released proof of stake time, and we're going to submit a peer-reviewed paper on proof of stake time to that first, I forget the name of it now off the top of my head, but that first crypto peer-reviewed journal. I can't remember the name of it, but we're going to submit to that. That's probably going to happen within the next month or two. But yeah, we solved this problem, and we solved it basically by making time be at stake. And time is at stake in this sense. And here's how it relates directly to what you're talking about with the chain, like multiple chain staking. So inherently, by having coins, you can stake on multiple chains. And because it's not brute force power, there's no stopping that. But what you can do is prevent any minority chain from being from outpacing the majority chain, the majority consensus chain. And so effectively what we have on proof of stake time is if you, because the your weight on the network is also, because actually let me say it this way, because the amount of age you have in coin age in proof of stake time is proportional to your share of the network consensus, then if you fork off onto your own chain, you now have a greater share of the consensus than you did on the main chain. And because you have a greater share of the consensus than you did on the main chain, your carried age is calculated as less. So you lose age. So you're losing your time on your own chain that you have a majority or more, closer to a majority of. And because of that, you have a lower weight, but you came from a chain with a higher difficulty. So you were able to fork the chain with your previous weight, but now you're on your own chain, and now you have a much lower weight because you have a greater share of the consensus on your own chain than you did on the main chain. So now your weight can't easily hit the difficulty target from the main chain. So basically what happens is, and this has happened multiple times, where you get mostly it's due to network latency. It's not actually due to 51% of the consensus. It's due to network latency. But we've had multiple times where nodes have forked off onto their own chain, and this happens in proof of stake. But the difference is if you're not the majority chain, if you have a greater share of the consensus than the majority chain, then the small minority chains slow down because they can't hit the difficulty target because they lost time. And if you slow down, you'll never be as fast as the main chain. And if you're not as fast as the main chain, then automatically the wallet sees a longer chain and reconnects you to the main chain. So yes, you can still stake on multiple chains, but you will never be able to stake at a faster rate than you can on the main chain.
Okay, so it creates shorter chains much faster. Like one chain always gets longer much quicker. Yeah. Okay.
Basically, whatever chain has the most stakers has more stake weight will always run faster than others. So it's the majority. The majority will always have a faster block time than the minority. So basically, so then what happens is, even if you have tons of coins and you fork off onto your own chain, within a few hours you automatically reconnect, you orphan, and you can actually see that in our blockchain. You can see spikes of orphans where people forked off but then reconnected automatically. We don't even get support issues on it. It just sees the longer chain and reconnects.
Okay, but doesn't it still leave potential for someone to, I guess, kind of DDoS the network where, say I have 20% of Vericoin, okay, new block, I'm going to, try and make like 3 or 4 different chains by staking, and then, okay, one's longer again, I then fork off of that one. So you're just constantly attacking the network, and you're not really losing anything for doing it, right? Is that still an issue?
You could, if you had a lot of coins and you set up multiple big nodes, okay, and you and basically you just hammered every node with a fake chain to the point where nodes are like, no, but you're not the longest chain, but they keep on having to tell themselves that you're not the longest chain. You could potentially. But actually, we have more protection against that than any other coin I know of. And the reason is because we don't have any super nodes. So we don't we don't have, so most proof of stake coins have sync checkpointing, which Purecoin set up, which is like the centralized mechanism that protects the consensus from this problem, this nothing at stake problem. Purecoin and all the other clones, apart from Blockcoin, I know they don't have sync checkpointing. But the vast majority of others, including Next, have a centralized or semi-centralized checkpointing system. We don't have that. We don't have any supernodes. We don't control any nodes that aren't like our own personal wallets on the network. So, so the probability of you being able to steer the network is completely dependent on how decentralized the network is, and our network is better than it's ever been, and we have nodes all over the world. So you'd have to have a shit ton of coins, and you'd have to. I don't know. It'd be very.
I actually just got an anonymous comment here. I think Vericoin has access to some free CPUs. They have a normally high number of nodes for a shit coin. So, like, oh, they're too good. Like, there's no way all these nodes are legit. So, have you guys,
those are legit nodes. It took us 2 years to get that many nodes. We did not have that many nodes when we first started. If actually you could tell the difference between fake nodes. Actually, you can easily tell the difference between fake nodes and real nodes. One is they're there right at the beginning, or they quickly get there, right? Because even when you, like even in our case, where our value like shot up like a rocket, all the coins were on the exchange. They weren't in the wallet. Like we have more nodes and a better distributed consensus as far as staking than we've ever had. And the reason is because we have more like actual users, not just speculative investors. So that's one way you can tell is how many nodes there are at the beginning versus as the currency matures. The other way you can tell is what percentage of the supply is staking. If like 80% of the supply is staking, that's not natural. That means that like 80% of the supply that staking is held by some auxiliary of either the developers or basically there's a small number of people with a lot of coins. So we have over time earned the percentage of coins of the supply that we have staking, and it's just been slowly growing.
Good answer. Deny. Well, and I gotta say, like looking at your block explorer here, it's like you guys have like 2 TXs per block, and you know what? That's here's one with 4. So someone actually used the chain. But then like you look at some chains, I think I don't want to be misquoted. I saw one that had like a couple hundred transactions per block. I'm like, okay, somebody's got a bot on this thing, making transactions to make it look like the network's being used. And we actually saw that with Blackcoin, someone turned off their transaction bot because like it just like dropped off. Like it was probably too expensive to run. So it seems like you guys are kind of pretty honest about your stats. If you're not trying to buy users, let's put it that way. Like we saw in that show, Silicon Valley, go to Bangladesh and have a bunch of guys just sending coins back and forth to each other.
Well, honestly, I mean, if we were doing things, dishonestly, I wouldn't have ever come on your show. I wouldn't have told you my name. I wouldn't have told people where I work. The only reason I feel safe doing all this is because I know I'm being honest.
Yeah, no, I gotta say, you definitely represent yourself well, Doug. And I felt that the first time I interviewed you, 14 months ago. I'll post that interview again because you guys should see Doug back in the day. He's very confident in his answers and very knowledgeable. As you can probably tell from the show. I got one last thing. Okay, so we were talking about proof of stake with nothing at stake. So you kind of outlined how proof of stake time helps, prevent that from becoming an issue. It doesn't necessarily prevent it, but it definitely stops it from being a risk to the network.
Right.
Does the Varium transactions or the Varium proof of work blocks going into their chain, does that prevent it even further? Like, does it add even more security?
Oh, it adds tons of more security because now you have basically a completely separate group of consensus creators, that are even creating the consensus in a totally different way on a separate network. So the blocks on Vericoin are going to be much more diversified than even a hybrid like Purecoin, which has both proof of work and proof of stake. But it's not separate networks. It's not necessarily separate users. And it's not with different fee structures and different supplies, and everything's different. So basically, we're maximizing decentralization and security of this consensus. I think not only was proof of stake time maximizing decentralization and security of the consensus for proof of stake, now we're taking it even a step further. And honestly, it just makes life easier for us because we don't have to worry about like shit being fucked up, you know? And the nice thing about decentralization is like I don't have a situation where I control something. I don't control anything. I couldn't take the network down if I wanted to, which means nobody can point a gun to my head and say, take the network down. There's no point. You're wasting your time. You're better off like going to another coin or something.
Well, yeah, like I feel so bad for Vitalik and I guess Slockit too, because like they have so much control of their network still that now everyone's like, fix it, fix it, fix it.
Yeah. And well, part of it is also when you first launch a currency, inevitably it's going to be more centralized. There's less nodes, there's less users, you're fixing stuff, you're doing this, you're doing that. So, in a good network, the decentralization matures. In the case of Bitcoin's consensus, it's become somewhat centralized because there's only a couple pools that could potentially be owned by the same person, etc. But the network itself, in a good network, it tends to decentralize over time. And in our case, that's definitely happened. In the beginning, we couldn't do no super nodes, for instance. But now you could, like, I moved to a new house last year. I set up my Vericoin wallet on a brand new IP address. We didn't have any super nodes running at all. And in 30 seconds, my wallet found a node without a conf file and no super nodes, which means because my IP address was never on the network, that there's not only sufficient decentralization without super nodes, but also enough decentralization and enough wallet nodes, full nodes, that it's good connectivity around the world.
Far out. Got a question pouring in here from the Jumbuck Slack. If mining pools are heavily invested in Varium, why would they allow a hard fork that takes away their ability to mine? Not sure what he's kind of asking there. I think it's like, okay, so you said it's Varium is sending transactions to Vericoin, so it's like Vericoin has to choose to accept them. But what if the Varium network just like they decide to fork? It's like, you know what, we're done with Vericoin. We're our own thing now.
Yeah, that would be, not as good as what we're suggesting for Vericoin, because basically there's no incentive for Vericoin to do that, but that could happen and that wouldn't be a problem. Vericoin is fine on its own. We're basically just taking Vericoin up to a new level where the transactions get faster and faster, and correspondingly there's more decentralization in the consensus, and there's a shorter block time, so there's more bandwidth essentially per block. So we're basically just making Vericoin better. If it turns out that Vericoin doesn't want that, or that Varium miners don't want that, it wouldn't change anything. I mean, they would just lose, their favorable relationship. But each protocol is totally standalone.
Okay. Well, yeah, and I guess this kind of brings us into our final topic of talking about the Ethereum hard fork. So, miners are going to go with the chain that devs support, in most cases, like Bitcoin being the exception because it is so far along and decentralized that the miners kind of choose what's in their best interest now.
Right.
But like, okay, so there's a plan to hard fork Ethereum network to stake at some point. So the miners are going to want to, I guess, side with the developers on doing a hard fork to reverse the DAO exploit. At least that's kind of what I'm thinking is going to happen. Like, the problem is they need, like 100% consensus. If they're even at like 75 or 80, they could actually probably get some issues. Well, they got to have the exchanges and a lot of the major wallet operators all have to be on the right chain. So it's not just miners even. But like, what risk do you think this poses to their proof of stake if they don't fork to reverse the DAO and they have this seemingly malicious person in control of, I think it's 5% of the coins?
It shouldn't pose a risk because 5% is not much. But I haven't seen actual like hard specifics on their proof of stake algorithm. I've just seen like, outlines and like articles, and they're probably still figuring out the parameters, etc. But 5% is not a risk in a good proof of stake algorithm. Like, for instance, we have the SuperNet wallet. It's a staker, and it has, I think, 8% of the supply. And proof of stake time handles that fine. We don't have, like, if the SuperNet wallet went rogue, I wouldn't worry about it. So they either, if they're worried about 5%, they either are struggling to, at this point, develop a secure proof of stake algorithm, or they have other competing factors as well.
Well, I think part of the risk is that, okay, the black hat hacker currently has 5%, and then the white hat hackers have 10%. But yeah, there's still 15% of the Ethereum supply was in this wallet, and if they don't hard fork or they don't even soft fork, these funds are kind of in limbo and they're constantly stealing them back and forth from each other. So you can kind of say 15% is at risk.
15? Yeah. 15%. If it's 15%, let's see. We did some calculations on this. And I mean, so in proof of stake time, we actually on the test net, which is different than a main net, because you can never, like I was saying, you can never truly simulate a main net inherently. But on the test net, we had wallets with 60% of the supply, and they were not able to 51% the coin. But on a main net, there's network latency. There's the China firewall. There's this, there's that. So it gets a lot more gray area. The closer you get to 50%, the higher the probability goes. And obviously, the closer you get to 100%, the assured problem increases. So yeah, 15% is definitely worse than 5%, but it still should be safe. So for instance, with the MintPal, we rolled back because we had the old proof of stake protocol and it was 30%. So that would have definitely been possible to 51%. If the MintPal hack occurred today, I would not worry about a 30% supply in the hands of a bad actor. And I wouldn't roll back even if I did. But sure, I mean, the higher the number is, the worse things get.
Yeah, for sure. Like, well, you said 30 was kind of a significant risk, and that's why you guys had to, I guess, roll back to prevent, that risk of hard fork. Well, if it comes to that again, it will be, I think it's an easier decision for proof of stake people to make, like, because you could have 70% of the coin holders, or say only 50% are, actively involved with Vericoin development. The rest are just, cold wallets or something. I think it's easier to convince, like, if this DAO exploit happened, when Ethereum was proof of stake, I think it would be a lot easier for the people with the most monetary input into the network, or monetary losses possible, to have them vote on the best incentive of the network. Because right now you just have, miners, which I said before are just contractors.
Right.
And if Ethereum dies, they just go to the next most expensive chain.
Yeah. If I was, for instance, if I was in Vitalik's position, number one, I wouldn't have been involved in all these decentralized sites. Well, not because I wouldn't. I mean, I certainly would have wanted to be, but it removes your ability to be an objective actor for Ethereum general purpose blockchain. Maybe because of his youth, or he's just willing to take on difficult challenges. When you are a representative of a currency, or in his case, a general purpose system, you have tons of people that love and hate you, or love your technology or hate your technology. So the more of the dApps that he's a curator on or whatever, the more difficult his situation becomes, the less objective he can be. And if I was Vitalik, I wouldn't have gotten involved in the other dApps because of the loss of objectivity inherently, based on how many people bug the hell out of you for one given reason or another if shit hits the fan. But also, there's no reason to hard fork for saving 5% of the supply in proof of work. There's no reason, there's no consensus reason. There's market reasons, etc. But there's no consensus reason to do it. In the case of the proof of stake, like I said, 5% is not. I wouldn't be concerned about.
It depends, I guess. There's something at stake. The guys are willing to lose all this 5% of the supply just to try and take the network down further. But
so the difficult challenge that we had to face as well, which I'm sure they're dealing with, is why did this person attack? Did they attack to make money, or did they attack to make money and fuck with the system for some other reason? So if they attack to fuck with the system and make money in the process, then the number of scenarios that you have to account for grow significantly. So I do agree that they have to correct problems in the solidity language. You can't make it easy for smart contract developers to write holes into their contracts. It has to be easy. If you're going to create a system like this, it has to be almost stupid easy to make a secure contract. And if that's not the case, then inevitably there's going to be problems. So they have to fix the holes in the system, but I don't feel that they have to hard fork to rescue funds.
Well, I think they just made a new class for kids in law school to fail, like smart contract law.
Yeah.
It's like, oh yeah, you failed again. We found another bug. Yeah, it's interesting. This is all cutting edge stuff, and setting precedent for sure too. Like whatever they do, it's gonna be a watermark on the history of Ethereum. Just like you guys are gonna constantly have to tell me every show you come on about the MintPal hack and what you guys had to do and what you kind of are doing since then. It's just become part of your story. That's really what it is.
Yeah, totally.
So we're at the end of our time here, but this has been a fantastic chat, Doug. And I don't know if you remember from the first show I did with you, we have a little tradition that we've been carrying on of guessing the Bitcoin price in 1 week's time. So we are at 660, almost 6, the devil's number, 664. So what do you think we're going to be at in a week's time?
I think we'll be at 687.
687 or 87. You're feeling just a tad bullish, on top of that line there. You know what? Like, I hate to be the bear, that guy. raining on everyone's party. Oh man, the halving's awesome. Disinflation is now at new levels. But I think we're gonna have a bit of a shakeout here before we see some rise in the fall. So I'm gonna probably be a bit bearish, and I'm gonna pick the other side. I'm gonna say 640. You know what? Maybe we'll look at the YouTube chat here. Is anyone throwing a number down? Tell you what, guys, who are watching this, because we actually had a decent number of live viewers this time. Maybe it's the popularity of Vericoin, or Steam it as probably one of the coolest audiences I've seen so far. But Vericoin, you guys, you definitely know how to rock the crowd. But yeah, if you guys throw in a number in the chat, I'll take the average of everyone's number, and then we'll throw it on the chart too, just so we can have a true prediction market. Get the wisdom of the crowd. But yeah, this has been great. And you know what, Doug, let's plan to talk, next year at this time, or another 14 months.
Sounds good, dude. Yeah, and then we'll talk about the pairing of the consensus of Vericoin and Varium at that point. Like, well, that'll be active, for a while.
Nice. Yeah, no, I definitely look forward to it, because you guys are going to drive some really cool markets right now. I know tomorrow night on the Coinergy show, which you guys should all check out, we talk about, the more technical aspects of the Bitcoin and altcoin space, or not technical analysis, which is, looking at the charts and seeing what they tell us. But I'm much more of a fundamental guy. When I talk to someone like Doug here, I don't need to look at what the price is in a year's time. It's probably not going to be as low as it is now. So once again, Doug, thanks so much. And everyone watching, tuning in at home, this is a great chat. We learned a lot. And see you in the next $1,000 bucks.
See you, man. Thank you.